Hey everyone, I hope that you had a great Thanksgiving. Let me begin by apologizing for not making a video leading up to the Thanksgiving Day game against Detroit. There were a couple of factors that came into play there. The snowstorm, for one, which obviously pushed the game from Buffalo to Detroit, although I guess that didn't really impact my weekend that much. It actually freed it up a little bit because I didn't go to the game, and kudos to you if you did. But with the game being on Sunday, I'm not able to react to it until Monday, and with Thanksgiving falling on Thursday, as always, I had a condensed week, and I simply didn't have the time. But I made sure I set aside this time this week to get this video out because the Bills have a huge stretch of games coming up. New England, the Jets, the Dolphins. That stretch will determine not only who does and doesn't make the playoffs, but who wins the division, seeding in the AFC, maybe even home field advantage. So all of it is coming into play over the next 3 weeks. So I had to make sure I got back on schedule, so to speak. So I hope that you'll forgive me. I hope that 2 Bills wins in 5 days has you in a more cheerful and a more forgiving mood. But I want to recap what happened in Detroit over those 5 days, both against the Lions and obviously against the Browns. So let's start with the Browns, because that game happened first. I think going into that game, a lot of us were just frustrated with the past 2 losses to the Jets and that gut-wrenching loss to the Vikings. So we wanted to just, let's wash our hands of this. Let's leave this in the past. But I think there were a couple factors that maybe positioned the Bills to be a little disadvantaged in that game. Number one, the travel, of course. The logistics of getting out of their homes to the facility, from the facility to the airport, and obviously out to Detroit. You were seeing players tweeting on Friday, like, so how do they plan to get us to Detroit by tomorrow afternoon? Because the snow was like up to some of their chests. So there was some logistical issues there, obviously. And even if the front office or the coaching staff or whatever wasn't expressing concern over it, the players were. They were openly expressing concern over it, on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. So I think that, that played a factor. Obviously, not having practice on Friday could be a bit of a disadvantage as well. And the Bills ended up using, maybe even the first quarter of the game as their Friday practice. At least it felt that way, because they came out pretty flat. Cleveland went right down the field in 6 minutes. They converted 2 3rd and 11s, which is just another theme for the Bills this year. They've had a really hard time with 3rd and long. And eventually there's a touchdown to Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper converts one of those 3rd and 11s. Jacoby Brissett gets another one with his legs before they ultimately connect on the touchdown to go up 7-0. And then the Bills get the ball back and go 3 and out. They give it back to Cleveland, who also goes 3 and out. Then the Bills get a nice punt return from Nyheim Hines. They actually got a nice punt return on the first one by Nyheim Hines, but they didn't do anything with it. This time he puts them in field goal position, returns it to the Cleveland 32, and they essentially go 3 and out again. They do go 3 and out again. This time they're in field goal range, so they're able to kick the field goal. Cleveland answers with a field goal of their own, and then the Bills go 3 and out again, capped off by a Myles Garrett sack on 3rd down, and we are just like, what is happening? You got to be pulling your hair out at this point. Maybe we're like, I need to go shovel snow. I got to get, this is driving me insane. I was yelling at the TV. I didn't want to be yelling at the TV, but that's where I found myself. It gave me really bad flashbacks. I don't know if all of you remember this, but the October storm in 2006. Granted, these two things aren't really related at all. But in 2006, there was a freak October snowstorm that dumped a ton of snow on Buffalo. And the Bills actually played the Lions in Detroit that weekend. And they obviously weren't very good at the time, the Bills, or the Lions. The Lions were actually terrible. I don't know if they'd even won a game up to this point, but they beat the Bills that day. And there we are. Everyone's just buried in snow, and the Bills lose to the hopeless Detroit Lions. So I was just having PTSD from that, watching a team that I believe is great, a Bills team that I believe is great, playing the Cleveland Browns with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. And it was not fun. For a quarter and a half, maybe even more, it was not fun. The Bills finally put the drive together, but they cap it off with another field goal. They had 6 of them on the day. Fortunately, they were able to put together 7 consecutive scoring drives. 5 of them just ended up in field goals. So, they really could have been up by a ton more. But they were pretty made in the 3rd quarter, right? I know that it was nerve-wracking at the beginning, and there was a little bit of nervousness at the end because Jacoby Brissett, much to his credit, throws for over 300 yards. And 2 long touchdown drives at the end of the game. The Bills are up 28-10 with 7 minutes to go, and there's a Browns touchdown. The Bills are able to put together a field goal drive to make it 15-point game. But the Browns didn't give up. They scored a touchdown with about 20 seconds left. They kicked an onside kick. It goes right off of Gabe Davis's hands, and that's a 50-50 ball at that point. But the Bills are fortunate enough to recover and get out of there with a win without sweating it out any further. But it's weird that I have to even bring this up because the Bills just have been so good at I say front running, but I don't mean it as a negative way this time. I have meant it negatively in the past, but when the Bills have gotten up, they've just run away from teams. They've just blown teams out all the time when they've gone up by 2 and 3 scores, and it hasn't happened the past couple weeks. They're up 27-10 against Minnesota, albeit for 11 seconds or something like that. But they didn't bring that home, and Cleveland gave them a little bit of a scare. The 28-10 lead wasn't totally safe, I guess. It was sort of safe. I mean, even if Cleveland gets that onside kick, they still have, 15 or 18 seconds or something like that, where they have to get a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to force overtime. But you don't want, let's just get out of here. Let's not even entertain the idea. But the Bills get out of there, despite all their, the weather factors and stuff of back home and the injuries that they faced. They were without Tremaine Edmonds in this game. Tre'Davious White wasn't active for this game. And then the injuries pushed over to the following game against Detroit as we kind of transition into that. Mitch Morse was hurt on the first play, I guess, or first series, but toughed it out the entire game. But he would go forward and miss the Detroit game. Tremaine Edmonds would again miss the Detroit game. Gregory Rousseau missed them both. A.J. Epinesa got hurt in the Cleveland game, missed the Detroit game. So the Bills are severely shorthanded for their 5-day stint in Detroit. But this is why you give the quarterback that much money. Because, Josh wasn't outstanding, I would say, against Cleveland. He was just 18 of 27 for 197 and a touchdown. But he was pretty darn good down the stretch there against Detroit. He finished with 253 and 2 touchdowns in that game, along with 78 yards rushing and a rushing touchdown as well. That's why he makes the big bucks. You don't give the quarterback $250 million to just be like, well, he really needs, these optimal circumstances to thrive. Nope, that's not what paying that position is about. You pay him to overcome things like missing starters, linebackers, and stuff. And it was a slog for the Bills at times. Even against Detroit. That game was not pretty either. The Bills, again, started off a little slow. They went 3-and-out on their first possession. They were able to score 17 straight points on their next 3 possessions, but the Lions answered. The Lions actually went up 7-0 following the Bills 3-and-out. The Bills answered with a touchdown of their own. There was a fumble after that led to another Bills touchdown, so they go up 14-7. But the Lions answer with a nice long drive, 76-yard drive, 15 plays, score a touchdown on 4th down to tie the game up. The Bills, much to their credit, answer with a field goal before halftime. And then they come out of the half with a 3-point lead. They go right down the field, and Allen does the play that he loves, but it's just another red zone turnover. The play that he loves that I'm referring to is this read option where he snaps, does this little tuck where he's going to give it to Singletary, whoever the running back is, and then he just pull, snap, throw. And it's there. Diggs is open. But the linebacker is reading it the whole way. He knows that's great film study by the Lions. And the Lions are kind of shedding this joke moniker, this total pushover. I said this about the Jets a couple weeks ago. The Jets aren't really pushovers anymore. I'm not sure if the Lions are either. That is a good example of it. They're scrappy. They're feisty under Dan Campbell. But they're still the Lions. They still do things that remind you they're the Lions. They fumble the football. They take safeties after big turnovers. They miss 29-yard field goals. And even then, they still really had a pretty good chance at winning the game, I think. The Bills went to sleep in the third quarter. Remember the old third quarter Bills from a year or two ago? They came back. They reared their ugly heads. The Bills went nowhere in the third quarter, other than that first drive that ended up in another red zone turnover. Fortunately, it was the only turnover over this two-game stretch in Detroit against Cleveland and the Lions themselves. It was their only turnover of those two games, but it took points off the board. Again, a habit that just has to stop. I mean, turnovers in general have to stop, especially on the plus side of the field. It's just getting ridiculous at this point. I mean, it's been ridiculous, and it continues to be ridiculous. But, like I said before, or I've said in previous videos even, that's a fortunate thing that happens for the Lions. It's a great job by them. And what do they come out and do? Remind you that they're still the Lions. They go backwards. A weird play where the center snaps it and Goff is surprised and ends up in a loss for like a loss of 5 yards. He misses Swift on a wheel route where Swift has that. He probably gets hit pretty hard by Poyer there, but Swift has it, and he has a first down too. And then he takes a sack on the next play. They still end up taking the lead later in the game, near the end of the third quarter, 22-19, and they force another Bills punt. So they have the ball with a chance to go up, 6 or 10 points here, but they end up punting themselves. The Bills, much to their credit, Josh puts together a drive when they have to have it, started on their own 10-yard line, and at that point, I think Bills fans, after seeing the last 4 possessions, 3 punts and a pick, were just like, oh, 90 yards now? That's all we have to do is go 90 yards? Josh put it together. Like I said, 14 plays, 90 yards, culminates with the touchdown to Diggs. Just a great job. But even then, there's still 2.5 minutes to go. You have to give it back to the Lions. So you need to survive one more possession. The Lions, reminding you again that they're the Lions, kind of playing for the field goal. They had all the time in the world, and then they neglected to use their timeouts. And then on 3rd and 1, when they're running the ball pretty successfully against a defense that's missing Von Miller at this point, Epenesa Rousseau, Edmonds, Trey White is not playing. So what do they try? A deep shot on 3rd and 1, which signals that they're going to kick the field goal on 4th down. They do, a weird one that goes right and comes back left, despite the fact that there's no wind, and it ties the game. And you're thinking, oh, brother. But Josh Allen. This is why you pay the quarterback $250 million. I just said it a minute or two ago. There was just something in his body language during the play. This deep-throated Diggs. They only I don't even know how many guys in history can make. But the guys that are active, like Mahomes and Rodgers, that's about it. Brady's done it before too. Where it's like, oh, they tied the game late. I don't care. I'll win this ugly. Watch me do this. You can't stop me. That is the attitude I want. I love it. But there was something in that play. Allen dropped back and he did this shimmy or this he kind of cocked back his legs and it was just this thing. I'm like, oh, he's gonna step up and just fire this thing, and he does. He gets it there in time, in front of the safety. Diggs running the perfect route. I mean, absolutely beautiful. Gets the catch, calls a timeout. They run 2 more plays. They kick the field goal for Tyler Bass. Just a great job. I mean, after everything that had happened on the previous couple possessions, the touchdown drive excluded, the second half, though, that was just so awesome to see. And, I mean, you have to come out with that. It's not like people are just so used to, I kind of just brought this up, people are just so used to the Bills blowing teams out. That's not realistic. You're not going to do that every week in the NFL, especially on the road. You're going to have to win games like this. So it was beautiful to see. Awesome job by Josh. Gets the turkey leg at the end of the game with Diggs and Bass. But who got robbed of a turkey leg? Ed Oliver. I thought Ed Oliver might have been the best player on the field up until maybe the last drive by Allen. The last 2 drives by Allen. Ed had that forced fumble on Jamal Williams and recovered it. The sack for the safety. I thought Ed was a monster. He was turning into a total monster. And that's good for him, good for the Bills. But this is a bigger picture type of point. The Bills have to strike while the iron is hot here. They're good now. They have all these players under contract now. They need to win now. It needs to happen. They're coming up on big decisions with Jordan Poyer, who came back in the lineup these past 2 games, and I thought showed his value to the defense. They're coming up on a big decision for Tremaine Edmonds, whose absence, I think, showed why he is valuable to the defense. Bills fans tend to ride him pretty hard. But I think he's pretty valuable to the defense. I thought the Bills were super vulnerable up the middle of the field and to quick slants and stuff like that. And they were weak on the outside as well, which I'm going to get to in a second. But, Poyer, Edmonds, Oliver is coming up for a contract pretty soon as well. Like, you have all these guys now. They're coming to tough decisions. Did I word that weirdly? They have all these guys under contract now. They won't be under contract maybe next year or the year after that. Like, tough decisions are coming where they're going to have to end up letting some of these guys go and plugging it away with different draft picks and stuff. DeMar Hamlin has been encouraging at safety, but you don't know what's going to happen with Micah Hyde, and then you're in the position where do you go with Micah Hyde and Hamlin, with Micah Hyde coming off a neck injury, or do you extend Poyer and keep going with Poyer and Hyde, and then DeMar Hamlin goes back into a reserve role? I don't know how that's going to work out. Like I said, there's questions to be answered, and I don't really want to face them yet. I want to continue enjoying this season, so let's focus on this next string of games, on the Patriots, on the Jets, on the Dolphins, get a really advantageous position, hopefully, in the division, and as well as the AFC. You never know what's going to happen with Kansas City. Of course, they're winning games against, they're coming back against the Chargers, and they get Bryce Perkins as quarterbacking the Rams. But, they have the Bengals coming up this week at Cincinnati, so maybe something will happen there. But Mahomes is 26-0 in his last 26 November and December regular season starts, which is just mind-blowing. So, control what you can control, and all you can control is New England this week, I suppose. So let's talk about New England this week. I do want to come back to something I just talked about first. What else you can't control is sort of getting healthier. You can't control injuries necessarily. The game against Detroit came with one big penalty, one big price, and that being Von Miller, which sucks. Obviously sucked because he's been worth every dollar so far, and obviously you always worry about him getting hurt. Anybody really, that extends to Josh Allen as well, who, by the way, I don't think is. People love to blame the elbow. Like, oh, it's got to be the elbow affecting him. It's so convenient to just blame the elbow when you want to. Like, oh, bad drive, guess it was the elbow. No. Like, I don't buy that. You got to miss me with that excuse. He showed on the last couple of drives, the last couple of throws, what he can do. There's something else at play there, whether you want to blame the offensive coordinator or blame the personnel. Come up with something better than the elbow. I'm not going to say the elbow hasn't impacted him on a throw here or there. I think he's feeling it, but I don't think it's overall affecting the entirety of his play. And that's my closing thought on that. But again, with Von Miller, hopefully you get him back sooner than later. It seems like the type of thing, because it's not a full ACL, MCL tear, which is really great news, that we're going to be left in the dark about it. Because the Bills are pretty good at keeping those things under wraps. But from what we can sort of understand, again, I'm not a doctor, it's a lateral meniscus tear, which you can play with apparently, depending on how well it responds to, a week or two of rest and playing with a knee brace and pain tolerance and things like that. So it's going to be a week-to-week thing with Von. He's obviously already been ruled out for New England. I don't expect him to play next week against the Jets. Probably don't expect him to play next week against Miami, although I'd love to have him for Miami because that is tracking to be one of the biggest games of the year, for sure. And maybe in even the entire league, not even just in the AFC East or the AFC. Hopefully, I know he's a freak, but he's getting up there in age, and when you're older, you don't tend to recover as fast, and I don't know. I really don't know. And not knowing sucks. It's the worst. The good news, I suppose, is you are still getting healthier. You did it. You got within 13 seconds of the AFC Championship without Von Miller last year, right? So, you're getting Rousseau back probably this week. Epinesa, he's practicing as well. They're both practicing. Mitch Morse is practicing. You might be down Deion Dawkins. That is a little bit unfortunate. He got hurt towards the end of the Detroit game. Seems like he stayed on the sidelines, though, and was cheering everybody on and moving around pretty well. It seemed like maybe he was trying to go back in the game, but they didn't want to take the chance. Still, he hasn't practiced so far this week, so it's starting to track like he's not going to play. And hopefully that's just a one-week thing because, they need him as well. They're facing good pass rushers over the next 3 weeks in the division. the AFC East has loaded up on pass rushers to try to get to Josh Allen, to get the guys like Josh Allen, and it's ahead of them. So you're getting Morse back, like I said. You're still going to have Bates and Saffold back at the guards, and then you got to decide what you want to do with Quessenberry and Brown. Do you want to flip them because Quessenberry's maybe more comfortable at right tackle? I don't really know, to be honest with you. But I would assume Brown just stays at right and Quessenberry goes to left. Either way, I expect Matt Judon to be a problem on Thursday. He has 13 sacks, so I expect him to be in Josh's face and the Bills to have a game plan for him. Because the Patriots are still pretty good on defense. I know they just gave up 33 points to the Vikings, but they're pretty good again. They're very good pass rushers. They're pretty good against the run. They only allowed 57 yards to Dalvin Cook, 59 to the Jets. That's the Jets. 78 to the Colts. That was with Ellinger and Deion Jackson. 51 to the Jets again. 243, just a random outlier, anomaly, freak, fluke, whatever you want to call it, to the Bears on Monday Night Football. What a weird game that was. The Bears just blowing out the Patriots in New England. They were going back and forth with Zappi and Mac Jones in that game, so that was weird as well. But 243 rushing yards there. But before that, 70 rushing yards allowed to Cleveland. That's Nick Chubb. So, I mean, the Patriots are... They're like... Despite what the Bills did to them last year, even though they got embarrassed by them in the first meeting, where they only attempted 3 passes and won the game, and the Bills went on to not punt in 2 consecutive games, I would say I'm not expecting the Bills to not punt in this game. I think that they're going to be presented with a few more challenges maybe than they had been, especially with the offense not really hitting plays like it has been in the past. Hopefully the addition of John Brown, maybe, I don't know if he's going to play. The Bills are so big on ramping people up. Like, I love bringing John Brown back. Don't get me wrong. One of my favorite players. His jersey's hanging on my wall. It's right there. This autographed jersey. I love the guy. He's one of my favorite players that ever played for the Bills. He was only here for like 2 years. But I loved him before that as well. Anyway, I don't mean to go on for that forever. It would be cool if he played. I love adding another weapon in there. It seems like maybe they want to give him Khalil Shakir's role. Khalil Shakir's been somewhere between like 20 and 40% of the snaps lately. So maybe they want those snaps to go to John Brown, somebody they trust a little bit more, somebody that Allen maybe trusts a little bit more. That would be understandable. And it adds, assuming he can still play, he has played very sparingly since being released by the Bills. It adds a deep threat and, just another passing game threat for Allen. But again, I'm not on I went on a rant about this maybe even last week. I'm not on the whole, we need more weapons. No, again, it's going back to a point I made like 10 minutes ago. You're not paying the quarterback $250 million to be like, well, if he doesn't have perfect circumstances, if everything around him is not great and perfect, he can't play. No, you pay him to overcome those things because he's supposed to be that good. Patrick Mahomes is doing it. He has Travis Kelce, granted, one of the best players to ever play the position, maybe the best at tight end. But he's got this just total hodgepodge of wide receivers, and he's insane. So, I mean, maybe the hard truth there, here's a hard truth. Maybe Patrick Mahomes is a smidge better than Josh Allen. Ugh, feels gross to say. Probably feels gross to hear, but it might be true. He's won 26 consecutive games in November and December. He's got a Super Bowl ring. He's been to 2. He's beat you twice in the playoffs. I mean, it's really not something that you can necessarily measure, but there might be enough evidence to back it up, as much as it hurts to admit. And maybe that's not to say that Allen can't continue to improve. But right now, I think you got to give the edge to Mahomes. I don't see how you can't. Anyway, that's not really what this is about. This is supposed to be about, we don't play Kansas City, and if we do again, it'll be in the playoffs, and we'll all be stressed about it then. New England this week. There's one point that I brought up earlier that I wanted to come back to, and that is in the secondary. Hopefully Tre'Davious White is able to play a little bit longer this week. Again, with the ramp-up period, maybe it's a half this week. It was only 2 series last week. But I don't think the coaching staff can trust Dane Jackson to play cornerback anymore. He's been playing 100% of the snaps, And, I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown killed them. Amari Cooper killed them. Taron Johnson's a part of that too. But Justin Jefferson killed them. It's just, I mean, Garrett Wilson, going back a couple weeks, had like 8 for 92. Hurt them. Bad. And, you know, the Dane Jackson's one of the common denominators here. So, hopefully, I guess not hopefully, I'm just okay with him going back to the dime roll with Trey and Elam. This is why you drafted Elam. Like, he's your first-round pick. Let him play. Benford went to IR, but you signed Xavier Rhodes to the active roster. So, you know, maybe it's just Trey, Elam, Rhodes, Taron Johnson, and then Dane Jackson goes back to being that extra corner. That's fine. He's fine in a fill-in role. He's a 7th-round pick. You shouldn't expect him to necessarily be a budding superstar, even though Tony Romo seemed to kind of allude to it. I just don't think he's justifiably playing 100% of the snaps on defense, and they've needed him to. I think that will make a. I think that him playing less snaps and maybe going back to, you know, Trey and Elam getting more, ramping them up and playing them more, will be a dramatic improvement for the defense on top of the way Ed Oliver's playing, on top of Tremaine Edmonds coming back in the lineup and Jordan Poyer getting healthier and things of that nature. So I expect the Bills to win on Thursday. I haven't been super impressed with Mac Jones. I'm super impressed by Ramondre Stevenson. Don't get me wrong. He's their dual threat guy. Doesn't, you know, really run the ball that much. You know, he had 160 yards earlier this year, but that was against Detroit. You know, here's his last couple totals: 36, 26, 60, 71, 39. But his receiving he's a real pass-catching threat. 9 for 76, 6 for 56, 3 for 10, and a touchdown against Indy, but that game was in the bag early. 7 for 72, 8 for 59. So he's become the guy that Mac Jones trusts, certainly out of the backfield. Mac hasn't been great in his own right, okay? He was pretty good against Minnesota, 382 and 2 touchdowns. The week before that, 23 of 27, which is a great completion percentage, but 246, and just, you know, they only mustered up a field goal against the Jets. They won on a punt return touchdown, basically, as time expired. But he took 6 sacks in that game as well. So, like, what people don't really think about as sacks they're worse than incomplete passes. So they could be throwaways, and which would damage his completion percentage, but overall help the team, right? Because they wouldn't be losing yards. So he's got a propensity to take sacks. He's taken 19 of them over the last 4 games. So despite the fact that the Bills are down Von Miller, I think that there's an opportunity to get some pass rush going. They're better on defense. How do you say that? The Bills are better on defense than the Patriots are on offense, despite the fact that the Patriots are... I don't even know how to say this. I think the Bills are, at worst, an even matchup for the Patriots on defense. A wash there. And I think the Bills are better on defense than the Patriots are on offense. So I think it's going to make a difference. I think that the main reason that people even consider the Patriots beating the Bills at this point is the scar tissue left over from Bill Belichick. Like us thinking that, you know, he still has our number or something like that. Because he's still Bill Belichick and you're like chasing this ghost or something like that. But I think that anybody that watches football, you know, from a third-party perspective that doesn't have that, you know, innate distaste for New England because you're a Bills fan would favor the Bills in this game. So I'm going to pick the Bills to win. I think there might be more field goals again. Let's go, I don't know, 26-17. 26-17, Bills over Patriots. Guys, another really long video. Thank you for coming this far. Hope you enjoy your weekend. Oh, and weekend. I'm just used to saying that. The game's on Thursday. Enjoy the game on Thursday. Let's talk on Twitter. My Twitter handle and YouTube username are the same. As always, above all else, go Bills.